Welcome back to the BUBU DRESS YouTube channel. In today's class, we are going to learn how to make this beautiful BUBU dress with elongated cape collar. You can see how long the collars are. It's very easy to make. I'm going to take you through how to cut and sew this in this class. If this is something you would like to learn, kindly stay tuned to the end of this tutorial. Thank you. Okay, so this BUBU is folded already, but I'm going to show you how I folded this. I'm using this stoned Ankara fabric, and then it's not going to have any shoulder seam, you can see. So if you want to fold it, the first thing you need to do is to fold into two with your length. So let's say the length is 60 inches, you had your hemming allowance to that, and then you mark your 60 inches. So once you have it, you fold like this into two in such a way that you have 16 inches in front and 16 inches in at the back. So this is your front length and your back length. So after folding into two like this, for the side, the next thing is for you to fold again into four. So that is how you fold your fabric. You first fold into two with the measurement of your length. You fold into two and then you fold again into four. So this part is going to be completely closed. That is what I have here. I have 60 inches in length on fold by two like this. So this is the front and this is the back. Then I'm going to fold again into four. So the next thing now is to take my measurement. Of course, it does not have a shoulder joining, so we'll not be opening the shoulder at all. So what I'm going to do now is to mark my neckline. I'm using a V neckline. So for the width of my neckline, I'm going to be using 3 inches. Like I said, it's a V neckline for both front and back, and it tends to widen up, so you have to be careful. So for the depth, depending on how deep you want it to be, I don't want this too deep, so I'm going to be working with 7 inches. So I'm using the 7 inches for both front and back. The neckline for both the front and back is the same, so I'm going to go ahead and mark that. So what you need to do is to take your ruler and then you connect together like this. Okay, so that's my neckline. The next thing is just to go over to the side and then you measure your round sleeve opening. You can see it's not going to be a fitted sleeve. So for me, I'm just going to measure between 10 to 15 inches is okay, depending on how full you want it to be. So I'll just measure 14 for my sleeve opening, 14 inches. Okay, I'm measuring 14 inches for my sleeve opening. So for shaping of the side, it depends on how free you want that to be as well. So let's say your hip is 46, you can divide that into 4, and then you're going to add extra allowances to it. So you can add between 4 to 8 inches. It's totally up to you and how big you want it to be. So now if my hip is 46, divided by 4 is 11 and a half, which is going to be here. So now I'm going to go ahead now and add whatever excess I want for this. So I'm going to be adding extra 6 inches and then 1 inch seam allowance. So that's going to leave it at extra 7 inches. It's a BUBU. I don't want it too fitted, so you can just go ahead and mark what you have from here. So this is 4 inches. I'm just going to go ahead and mark 4 inches all the way to the hem. That is all you need to mark. And then for your shoulder, the shoulder from your center back to my sleeve length for me is 21. So I have 21 inches here. So the rest that I have is what I'm going to use to hem it inwards. Another way you can get this is your actual shoulder measurement. The shoulder is 16 divided by 2 is 8. So you first mark your shoulder measurement, and then the next thing is to mark the sleeve length that you want. You can use between 10 to 12 or 13 inches depending on what you want. So that is all we need to do for this. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark this straight line all the way to the hem. So I'll just come here and mark the 4 inches. So it's going to have a cape. If you don't have enough fabric for your cape, you can use fabric from this side for the cape. So in that case, you may not use 4 inches. You may not, so that you have something really wide. So you can just mark 5 inches here so that you have something enough that you can use to cut out your cape. your collar. I hope you understand what I'm saying. So from here now, you can just mark 5 inches. So with 5 inches, we will still have enough for the collar if that is what you want. But for me, I'm marking 4 inches because I have another fabric that I can use for the collar. So now that I have marked the for 4 inches, I'm going to go ahead and connect. I'm going to go ahead and connect everything together like this, all the way to the sleeve opening, which is here. So once that is done, you go ahead and create a curve to connect it into the sleeve opening. Then you grab our scissors to cut it out. It is that simple. So for the collar, you're going to measure your neckline. Remember, it's the same for both front and back. So whatever you measure now on fold, you multiply into 2. So I'll just take it like this. The front and back is the same, and then I'm going to measure what I have. So here I have 8 inches. That is what I'm going to use to cut my collar. So I'll bring my leftover fabric. The collar is also not going to have shoulder joining, which means I'm going to be cutting both the front and back together. So I'll put my fabric on fold, and then I'll measure the 8 inches. Okay, so for the collar, like I was explaining, you can see the fabric has a lot of stone on it. So I'm trying to avoid sewing as much as possible. That's why I don't have a shoulder seam. So for the collar as well, we're going to be using the fabric has both the lining and the main fabric. So one side of the collar, I don't want it to have joinings, which means it's supposed to be 2 for 1. You have a lining and then the main fabric upwards, and we are using the same material, so I'm going to be cutting it together. So you need to determine how wide you want the collar to be. So for the width of the collar, I want it to be around 4 inches. Okay, I want it to be around 4 inches. So because I'm not going to be having joining on the other side, I'll have joining on just one side. I'm going to add ½ inch to it, and that's going to give me 4.5 inches. So now, instead of cutting the fabric separately, you will now have to cut them together. So that means you have 9 inches, then on fold you have 4.5. So one side of your collar is already going to be joined. So that is what I'm going to do now. But I want to cut the two sides together, so I'll be folding my fabric into 4. So I'll just measure out my collar with 9, or we can just work with 10 inches. So now I have 10 inches. So what I'll first do is to fold my 10 inches into 2. Just watch it carefully. If you don't mind, you can cut them separately as well, but I don't want to show too much. So you can see I folded it into 2 first. I'm making sure that I don't have excess. So after folding into 2, I'm going to go ahead now and fold again into 4. So each pair is going to be for each side of my collar. So now I have it folded into 4 like this. So, and you check the width of your collar again. I still have up to what I need. So once you have your width of your collar, the next thing you need to measure is the length. So for the length of the collar, you take into consideration the length of the neck. That's what we measured out for the neck. So you are going to measure that out. We measured out 8 inches for the neck. It's an elongated collar. So for the extension of the collar as well, I'm going to be using the same 8 inches. You can use more or less if you want. So that is going to be 16 inches. And remember that that is for one side of the collar. It's not going to have shoulder seam. It's going to be like this. So which means you have to have that 16 inches in 2 places. That's 32 inches. By the time we cut it out, you will understand it better. So you can add some allowance to that. So let me just measure out 34 inches. Then I'm going to cut it out so that we can continue. It's very easy to do. So now I'm taking out the collar, and this is for both the lining and the main fabric of the 2 sides of the dress. Okay, so the collar is out now. So to shape the collar, remember I said it will not have any side seam. it will not have side shoulder seam, so you are going to fold it into two like this. So this part you will leave it open, because this part is going to be, you will leave it closed. This open part is where you are going to shape. So what you need to measure out now is your neck, the 8 inches neck. Remember, we have folded it into two now. You measure out what you measured on your neck, which is 8 inches. So I'll add half an inch seam allowance to that. I have 8.5. Then the excess now is going to be the elongation of your collar. So what you just need to do is to place your ruler from where your actual neck, this is where you are sewing to your neck. That's why we are using the neck measurement. This is what we are going to be sewing around the neck. This is the extension of the collar. So from where your neck measurement stop, you just place your ruler in a diagonal form like this, and then you connect to the end. Okay, so once you connect it to the end, you grab your scissors and then you cut that out. So once you cut it out, the closed part of this upper part that you are sewing to your neck, you have one close end. You go ahead and open it out, so that you have your two separate collars. So what I have here is my neckline for both front and back, 8 inches for front, 8 inches for back, all together. And then you will have two pieces of your collar, because you're going to have two for each side. So what you need to do now is to take this to your sewing machine, and then you sew just the elongated part up to here, and then that's why we have half an inch allowance here. Then you sew the other elongated part as well up to here. So now this is what you are going to have. Okay, one for the front and one for the back. And then you have the same thing on this side as well, one for the front and one for the back, and it's going to be like this. So this elongation can be as long as you want. If you want yours to be longer than this, it can be longer than this. So it's totally up to you and what you want. So I'll take this to the sewing machine now, and then run a stitch from here all the way to this part, and then do it for the second part. So you can see that I did not have to join. So if you are going to be joining yours, it means this part you slash it and then you join it back. But you can see that this fabric has a lot of stone on it, so I'm avoiding joining as much as possible. I've gone ahead to turn it. You can see I added estate to it because the ankara is a bit soft. So this is what I have. It is turned neatly now. These are the two pairs for the collar. So the next thing to do is just to bring your fabric, your dress, while it's still opened like this. You're going to bring it, and then you notch the shoulder area so that you can sew from collar to collar. So this is what we want to achieve by the time you are done, which means you're going to be sewing from the wrong side like this. You sew it from the wrong side, and then you flip it to the right side. So you're going to do this for the two sides. You have two for each, so one is for each side. You can pin it first before you go ahead to sew. So you can see I'm just pinning from end to end. You pin it down, you check what you have, and then you go ahead to sew. So this is the first side. I have pinned it, and then by the time I'm done sewing it, I will weave it off, and then it's just going to lay on the dress like this. So I'm going to go ahead and pin the second side as well. You take the collar for the second side, and then you pin it from inside, from the wrong side like this. So we are going to pin it. Once you pin it, you can even check it to see what it's going to look like. Then you take it to your sewing machine to sew. So this is what you're going to have when you are done sewing it. You can see I've sewn this together. So if you want, you can also cut a facing to turn it, but for me, I'll just take this to my weaving machine, and then I'll go ahead to weave it. So once it is weaved, your collar is going to look like this. Remember, you sew on the wrong side because you're going to be flipping it over to the right side. So it's going to cover the seam allowance that you have here. That's why I'm just weaving it. It's not going to show anyway, but if you want to still use bias, you can use that. So once you do that, you hem the sleeve just like that, and then you fold your front and back over each other. So when you fold the front and back over each other, you can see I have gone ahead to weave it. And you can see the neckline area is neat. If you want, you can use facing to also turn it in, but this is okay for me. So this is what we have. Once you weave it and everything is neat, you're going to have something this long. So for the collar, if you want your collar to be longer than this, remember this is just 8 inches extension. You can extend it up to wherever it is that you want. I hope you enjoy making this with me, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.